Welcome to a tutorial on Mechanism or pentupling. Now I'm doing this tutorial on Vault Hunters 118, but it is relevant to all mod packs that have Mechanism or pentupling inside of it. If you are as reasonably confused as you should be with Mechanism or pentupling, I am going to be here to try to hold your hand through every step and make sure that you understand each step of this process, from ore singling to ore doubling to or tripling to quadrupling and to pentupling, including all of the infrastructure necessary to make it. This tutorial is going to start off with producing the 3 chemicals needed to go all the way to 5 times ore processing. That is oxygen, hydrogen chloride, and sulfuric acid. Then we will go into the actual processes of doubling, tripling, quadrupling, and pentupling your ores. Keep in mind that running this process at full speed requires an insane amount of Fe per tick, just a ridiculous amount. So I have an induction matrix hooked up to a creative energy cell from Power to supply this, but know that you're probably not going to be running it at full speed until you get into some massive power generation. So this is our materials list for the infrastructure. This is going to give us oxygen, this is going to give us hydrogen chloride, and this is going to give us sulfuric acid, and it is important you build them in that order. For our oxygen, really simple, just some infinite water supply and an electrolytic separator. For the hydrogen chloride, another infinite water supply, a minimum of 37 thermal evaporation blocks, 3 thermal evaporation valves, a thermal evaporation controller, an advanced solar generator or a resistive heater, an electrolytic separator, and a chemical infuser. And for sulfuric acid, you're going to need another infinite water supply, a chemical infuser, a chemical infuser, a chemical oxidizer, a chemical injection chamber, and a rotary condensator. And of course, all 3 infinite water supplies can be the same one, just, if you want to keep it clean, you could spread them out. You're also going to need a healthy amount of advanced piping, universal cables, pressurized tubes, and fluid pipes. I say advanced so that you can keep this thing running pretty fast, because you're going to produce all of your chemicals nice and quick, otherwise you slow down the whole process. Alrighty, for our first step, you want to make sure to run power wherever you'd like, place down your electrolytic separator and your infinite water supply, and ensure that your infinite water supply is running into your electrolytic separator. If you run into this problem, where you have your pipe connected to your water and your separator, you're going to need a configurator. All you gotta do with the configurator is shift right click the end of the pipe that's connected to the water supply twice to change it to pull, and it will fill your electrolytic separator, creating hydrogen and oxygen, both of which we're going to need. You're going to want to set it to dumping excess on either one so the machine will not fill up and stop. Great, that is legitimately step 1 completed. Now the next step is definitely going to be more involved than the last one. Let's start with placing a chemical infuser next to our electrolytic separator and ensure that it is going to be filling up with hydrogen. Right now it's filling up with oxygen, which is kind of no good. So you're going to want to go into the side configuration of this electrolytic separator, into the gases configuration, and make sure the output is output 1 in this case, which is the hydrogen output. This guy right here is now full of oxygen, and you can actually use a dropper, or rather a gauge dropper, to pull the oxygen right out of there. Sweet, now we're filling up with hydrogen in our chemical infuser. Awesome. Next, place your other electrolytic separator right down next to it. You're also going to want to make sure that in the gases, eject number 2, so output 2, is on the left. That's very important. Output 2 needs to be on the left. You can also set dumping excess on both of these prematurely. Awesome opossum. Now let's build a thermal evaporation plant. They're very easy to build. Just make a 4x4 square of the thermal evaporation blocks on the ground. Add your valves and controllers. The valves and controllers cannot be in the corners. This is a no-go. It has to be blocks in the corners. I'm going to add a valve here so that I could pipe directly into this electrolytic separator, and a pipe here for a resistive heater. Now, if you're just going to use advanced solar generators, you don't need a resistive heater, but I know in some mod packs, Vault Hunters included, you don't get access to these guys until later in the game. So I'll show off both with the resistive heater as well as with the advanced solar generators. And once you have those 2 valves in, make sure you have a valve somewhere for a water input. You can even put that right over here if you just want to pull the water from over there. But just to keep things clean, I'm going to have my water input on the other side and use a different infinite water source. And you want to make sure you build your walls up too high. You'll know you've done it right when you get those red particles. You can actually punch out these corners if you want to save resources. You can see here we need to input water to output brine, and we need a lot of heat to do it quickly. You can generate heat by placing solar generators in all 4 corners, or 1 corner, or 2 corners, or 3. You don't need all of them, but the more you have, the better. You can see that heats it up really fast, but if you don't have access to those, you can run power into a resistive heater, and it will also heat this guy up. And what's cool about the resistive heater is you can actually type in the terminal to tell it how much energy you want to use. I find like 150 to be a decent amount. It won't produce a ton of stuff, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to leave the advanced solar generators on so this thing gets really hot, really fast, and we're producing as much brine as possible. Now you just got to grab your infinite water supply and make sure to pipe it into the thermal evaporation plant, and you can see we are producing a very healthy amount of brine. That brine is going to go into an electrolytic separator to be turned into sodium and chlorine, and the chlorine is going to infuse with the hydrogen to make hydrogen chloride, as the name may suggest. So make sure to take your pipes, make sure to set it to pull, and you can see we are separating into chlorine and sodium, and since we already set up our directionality, the chlorine is going right in here, and we're producing hydrogen chlorine. Amazing! Now I'm going to be placing speed upgrades in all of these, but like I said, this is going to consume a very large amount of power, so if you're not able to produce like 100,000, maybe 200,000 FE per tick, I wouldn't add max speed upgrades. I definitely would put speed upgrades in them though, because you don't want these processes to be slow. Alrighty, now for the last step, and I did kind of forget to mention, you need a lot of gunpowder for this, so make sure you have a pretty decent amount of gunpowder, because that is going to be your input. We are going to need our chemical infusers, oxidizer, injection chamber, and rotary condensator, and I will build this a few blocks back just to keep it nice and separate. Let's start with our rotary condensator because it is the easiest of all of them. Just plunk that down somewhere and make sure to pull a water supply into it. Use your configurator, of course, to pull from your water supply and into the condensator. But you can see we are not doing anything yet because we need to flip this switch to make it a decondensator. At the moment, I'm not running any power to it, but once I do, this will create water vapor, and we're going to want to make sure that it will output water vapor on the right, where we will place a chemical infuser that we want to input gas on the left. Perfect. This water vapor is going to mix with sulfur trioxide to create this sulfuric acid. To produce sulfur trioxide, we need another chemical infuser. We're going to want to make sure this is outputting gases on the left. We want to output on the left because that is where we want it to go. And also ensure that we are going to be inputting 1 on the back and 2 on the right. Perfect. Now, what's nice about where I put this infuser is it is a straight shot away from our oxygen supply, which is actually very important. We want oxygen to go into that. So I'm going to make sure that we are outputting 2, which is our oxygen supply, to the front and pull our tubes right on across. Of course, I was using universal cables, not pressurized tubes. That was silly of me. Make sure you're using the right tube, which is pressurized. There we go. Now the oxygen's flowing out and filling up that side. Perfect, perfect. And of course, while I'm at it, I will run a power cable underneath our rotary condensator, just so you can see it begins producing the water vapor that goes right on into this infuser. Perfect. And I'll open this up and add power cables as I go. Awesome. So we have our oxygen. Now we do need our sulfur trioxide, which has a little bit of a process to it, but nothing horrific. I'm sorry, I meant to say sulfur dioxide. Hopefully that wasn't terrifically confusing. To make sulfur dioxide, we'll need 2 machines, a oxidizer, as well as an injection chamber. And this is where it'll be super good to have a large amount of gunpowder and perhaps a chest, or if you have it, storage drawers. I will use a little chest that I'll fill with some gunpowder. Dump a bunch in there. You don't need this much, and make sure your chemical injection chamber is going to be accepting items from the right, so input or output, or of course input. Perfect. We are going to need to fill it with hydrogen chloride, and to do that I am going to pull out from this, but of course you can see our pipes are connecting. You can actually use a configurator to stop pipes from connecting to each other. I will pull this line upwards. Do make sure to actually use the correct tube. Beautiful. Okay. Now we're full of hydrogen and chlorine, and you can see if I bring power over this machine, it will begin to oxidize our gunpowder into sulfur powder, and make sure that items are outputting on the left, and press this button to auto-eject them. Of course, once we get the item set up to input on the right, beautiful, the oxidizer will work all on its own and create for us sulfur dioxide that once again we are going to output on the left. That goes into here, creating sulfur trioxide with the oxygen, which goes into here, creating sulfuric acid with the water vapor. Great. Okay, great job. You are now producing every single gas you need. We have sulfuric acid coming down this line, you can see, with Walia on. Oops, I pulled the wrong one. Don't be silly like me. There we go. Here's the sulfuric acid, which we've produced quite a bit of. We have our oxygen line coming out here, which again, we have quite a bit of. And we have our hydrogen chloride line coming out this way. Perfect. Yeah, and if your brain is kind of fried or spaghetti like mine clearly is right now, pause the video, stretch your legs, take a break, eat a snack. This is a lot, but it is what you need. All right, soldier, had your R&R yet? Good. I am glad you are feeling rested and ready, because that was actually the hard part. Yeah, the actual pentupling process is super easy because it's completely modular. It's like a puzzle. One machine goes down, then the next, and the next, and the next, until you're all good. And you can see I've prepared a nice little power line, so let's jump right into it because the resources are few but slightly expensive. This is actually all you need, and it's going to be placed in about this order. For 1 times processing, you got your energized smelter. For 2 times, you need a crusher and an enrichment chamber. For 3 times, you need a purification chamber. For 4 times, you need an injection chamber, and for 5 times, you need your dissolution, washer, and crystallizer. I will say, if you're playing in the Vault Hunters 118 pack, these 3 things require echo gems, so make sure you have the resources to do this before jumping right into it, or you will be sad. And check this out. All you have to do is place down your machines in this order. Smelter, enrichment chamber, crusher, purification chamber, injection chamber, crystallizer, washer, dissolution chamber. That's all you need. That is the pentupling setup, almost complete. Now you can see our dissolution chamber we filled with acid. Our washer, we're going to want to fill with water. Once again, of course, you could always use the exact same water supply, but for cleanliness, I will use a new one just to show you where you need it. Perfect. Our injection chamber, you are going to need some nice, tasty hydrogen chlorine. Yes, delicious hydrogen chlorine. Perfect. And in your purification chamber, you're going to need some delicious oxygen. And like any good mechanism mechanist, I am just going to do pipe spaghetti and make a big line of oxygen over here. It is always a fun challenge to try to make this stuff look nice, and trust me, it is difficult, but you need oxygen inside your purification chamber. And that's it. The rest of these things do not require any chemicals, and that is why we needed these 3 chemicals. This is ore pentupling all lined up. The last thing to do is set up your inputs and outputs. And why not set them up the fun way while watching something go through it? If you are in a version of Minecraft that has raw ores and raw blocks, the most efficient way to do this is actually with a raw block. For this case, let's use a block of raw iron. Now, if this was actual real ore pentupling, we would get 45 ingots out of it. So let's see what we get out of this. You're going to take your block of raw anything, place it in the dissolution chamber, and watch as it melts into a slurry. Now, automatically, the setups are perfect here, which is going to turn it into dirty iron slurry that will wash it into clean iron slurry, and that got sent all the way over to the chemical crystallizer. That will crystallize the clean slurry and pretty much is going to automatically send it over to your injection chamber if you have the line in this thing. All mechanism stuff likes to input on the left and output on the right, so just give it 1 second. Okay, perfect. Iron crystal. That's right, because we do need to set item eject to on in all of these. Beautiful. The shard, or the crystal, is being injected, and it will turn into a shard. Perfect. Let's eject that. Awesome. Now we are purifying our shard, and it will purify into a clump. Just like that. Let's eject that. The clump is now being crushed in our crusher to turn it into dirty iron dust. Delicious. And lastly, we will eject that into the enrichment chamber to enrich the dirty iron dust into clean, smeltable iron dust. Awesome. Ejecting that, it will go into the annoyingly loud energized smelter, and we will see an iron ingot out of this massive process. And all that's left for us to do now is wait for the whole dissolution chamber, washer, crystallizer, injection, purification, crusher, enrichment, and energized smelter process to go through. So I'll see you guys when it's done. All right, it's finished, and we got 30. Okay, so now you're saying to me, Jojo, you promised me ore pentupling, and you told me that it'd be most efficient to use the raw blocks, but this didn't 5 times the ores. We turned 9 into 30. That's definitely not times 5. Well, you're actually multiplying the ore by 6. Let's go through the math. Now, in this little thought experiment, I am assuming that you are using a Fortune 3 pickaxe or higher if you're in a mod pack that supports it. With a Fortune 3 pickaxe, when you break 1 iron ore, your average is 2 raw iron. So you would only need 5 iron ore to get 9 raw iron ore, 1 block. And check that out. 5 iron ore, would turn into 30 iron ingots. And to prove this, I'll go into survival and break this stuff right now. Putting my money where my mouth is, and you'll see we are absolutely going to get to 9 raw iron. In fact, we got a little extra, meaning this is just a bit more efficient than 6 times processing. Now, if I were to just throw an iron ore into this and it goes down the line, you will see we will get 5 ingots. And by the way, I love watching the machines spring to life after throwing something in, especially when they're all fully upgraded. And there we go. 5 iron ingots, just like I promised. So it is ore pentupling, but it is raw ore sextupling plus like 0.33333333333. Congratulations, you do now know how to do this very complicated but extremely efficient mechanism process. A few things to remember is you're going to want to put gas upgrades into any machine that uses a gas, so that's going to be your injection chamber, your purification chambers, because you do not want them to run out of gas. That is very annoying, and of course, running this at full speed requires hundreds of thousands of FE per tick, so keep that in mind. And of course, as promised, here is my ore pentupling system that I have on my single-player Vault Hunters world. You can see it is very pretty, running into many chests. You can see a lot of ingots from my last ore pentupling thing. These are all the machines, and I've hidden all the nasty tubing and piping in this horrible spaghetti outside of the facade of my little satellite space station. Okay, that's my shameless plug over, and the video.